Morning to everyone on the live stream and who are joining us here on Zoom. We're glad that you're here. For those of you who are on the live stream, note that today we have two different links. We're not going to keep this meeting up the whole day because there's the big gap when we are in the workshop sessions here at Sonoma State. And so this meeting will be down during that time, which ends the live stream. And so we'll pick it up again at the later time, but it just means there's two different links. You'll notice when you came in that those are posted on ncncucc.org. For folks following along, we are running just a little bit behind schedule as we get started here today. We're having a little bit of technical difficulties and things getting started. It is, of course, our first morning, and so we're remembering how to wake up and move around. So we will be just a little bit delayed from here. So don't fret that you're just seeing the splash screen with the NCNC logo. We will go live with all of our activities as soon as we can, and then our moderator will make any adjustments or announcements to our schedule if we do need to do that for later in the day. If you joined us yesterday, you might remember that there were some changes for today. Those have already been pushed out to the guidebook app, so you can look on your guidebook app. Everything there is up to date, as well as a couple of additional pieces. If you're looking for the link to the video stream from the discernment session on June 4th, that is now in the guidebook app, along with some updated resolutions, a nomination slate, more stuff happening all the time. So do look there for those pieces. Meanwhile, we are glad that you're here with us today, and we'll get started just as soon as we can.
before.
So we will,
Trying to get. What do you need? Are you trying to?
we will now be resuming our annual gathering and beginning and centering this morning with a time of praise and worship. Just a friendly reminder to those of you who are willing and able to please, even though there isn't a mask mandate, we are recommending wearing masks and encouraging it, especially as a way of loving our neighbors who are immunocompromised. And so thank you all for being here, for this time of praise and worship. And let us begin.
Thank you, Reagan. Good morning to everyone.
Good morning.
All right, one more time. Good morning to everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Ooh, it's so good to see another day that was not promised to us. Every day is a gift. If we have the breath of life in us, it is an opportunity to say thank you and to bless God. Bless God while the keyboard's arriving. And bless God for our special guests today who are with us. And so we're going to do several songs this morning. We're thinking about equipping ourselves to love, because we have to equip ourselves to love. It's easier to do so many other things given all of the kind of craziness that's in the world. But today we get the opportunity. Yesterday we committed ourselves to learn. Today we are equipping ourselves to love. Before we have some framing, Pastor Davina, thank you. You just give a hand to Pastor Davina and to all of our conference ministers for work. All right. So we wanted to start the amen sound. Yay. And God said, let there be sound. We wanted to start this morning with a selection, a kind of a meditative selection that was composed by the great and wonderful Richard Smallwood, who composed Total Praise. Many of you know that selection. So we'll start with that. Thank you. And we're going to just work things out as we can. Thank you for your patience. We have an impromptu choir and all of that. So we're going to remain seated for this first song.
Did you say an impromptu fire?
Yeah.
Over there.
Over where?
No, there.
let you hold this. Sorry. And if not, you can just listen to this, but if you know it, let's just end as we call it. But I know a song that you all do know, because I really want you to sing. Spirit of the living God, fall fresh on me. Spirit of the living God, fall fresh on me. Melt me, melt me, mold me, mold me, and fill me, Spirit of the
So I think that's it. How hard to find.
Good morning. This is the day that the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. It's so good to see everybody. We're seeing people we haven't seen, some since last year, and well, longer than that, actually. So it's great to see everyone. The songs that are chosen for this morning are freedom songs. In fact, when I went through them last night, I thought, I don't know some of these songs. So we're all together, some of us in not knowing these, and some of you know these songs pretty well. But they compose a revolutionary liturgy of song, which ushered religion out of the church and into the streets.
Yeah.
The Black Protestant mainstream ushered into human history a new way of looking at the liberation of God made known in God's people. That it wasn't just something we talked about. It wasn't just about pearly gates and golden streets. It was about God making change real in our daily lives and in our hearts. In fact, among many of the liberation theologians, if you couldn't make that change real in the world, it wasn't worth anything at all, and I agree with that. It is a paradigm of militancy. African-American people were not just singing about freedom, but were systematically seeking it and seeking ways to bring it into reality in their communities. So some of the music you'll hear this morning is about that experience. Let us embrace it together, even as we learn. Thanks be to God.
Thanks be to God. How many of you have sung the song, "The Revolution Has Come"? Have you heard this song? Anyone that knows this, wave your hand. All right, great. We get to teach new songs. So the words are, what a time to be alive, what a time to be alive, the revolution has come. What a time to be alive, what a time to be alive. When we rise up, we've already won. Then we sing, the revolution has come, we've won. So follow along, we'll just learn together. What a time to be alive, what a time to be alive, the revolution has come. What a time to be alive, what a time to be alive, when we stand up, we've already won. Okay, you know it now. Let's sing it. That's it. What a time to be alive. What a time to be alive. The revolution has come. What a time to be alive. What a time to be alive. When we rise up, we've already won. One more time. What a time to be alive. What a time to be alive. The revolution has come. What a time to be alive. What a time to be alive. When we rise up, we've already won. The next part says, the revolution has come. The revolution has come. The revolution has come. When we rise up, we've already won. Once again, the revolution has come. The revolution has come. The revolution has come. The revolution has come. When we rise up, we've already won. And the next part says we've won. We won. We won. We won. We won. We've already won. We've already won. We won. We won. We won. We won. We rise up. We've already won. We've won. We won. We won. We won. Rise up. We've already won. We won. We won. We won. We won. When we rise up, we've already won. We have 2 minutes. Praise God. Well, this will be an abbreviated praise and worship time. I really want to teach you another song. We had several that we were going to do, but this is how it goes. So there's a song that was written by Melanie DeMore, And if you can get to the words that say, I'm on my way. This one we are going to do a cappella with a little different participation. I'm going to invite you, those who are able, willing and able to rise. And if you're not able to rise, it doesn't matter. We're going to, if you are to rise or to do with your hands. That's what we're going to do your marching. However you can march. So the song goes like this. That's all right, that's all right. Keep the movement going. So glad for your flexibility. It's on. Thank you. I'm on my way, marching over into freedom land. I'm on my way, crossing over into freedom land. Let's do that. I'm on my way, crossing over into freedom land. I'm on my way, crossing over into freedom land. One more time. I'm on my way, crossing over into freedom land. I'm on my way, crossing over into freedom land. Don't you know that you got wings? Fly to freedom, fly. Be ready when the hammer rings. Fly to freedom, fly. Way down yonder by the riverside. Fly to freedom, fly. That old North Star will be your guide. Fly to freedom, fly. We're on our way. We're on our way, crossing over into freedom land. We're on our way, crossing over into freedom land. Once again, we're on our way, crossing over into freedom land. We're on our way, crossing over into freedom land. Crossing over into freedom land. Crossing over into freedom land. Crossing over into freedom time. Crossing over into freedom land. Thank you.
Thank you, Pastor Ann Jefferson, and all our worship leaders. Just a couple of things as we keep going. A couple of right now we're not doing announcements right now. Right now we are blessed to have a word from one of our generous sponsors from the Pacific School of Religion. So thank you to PSR for sponsoring, for being one of our sponsors, and now we'd like to hear from them. So please welcome up Nicole from the Pacific School of Religion.
Morning. Good morning. My name is Nicole Nafa. I serve as the Director of Development at Pacific School of Religion. Can I hear if PSR is in the house? Hi, PSR student or alum or faculty or staff, yay. We're so glad to have such a strong connection with our conference. I bring greetings on behalf of our president, David Vasquez Levy, and all of us at Pacific School of Religion. He was with us last night for our after party, but couldn't be here today. And so he asked me to share this brief greeting with you on his behalf. Dear siblings in Christ, greetings from Pacific School of Religion's students, faculty, staff, and Board of Trustees. We are grateful for the long-standing partnership between PSR and the Northern California Nevada Conference of the United Church of Christ. I am deeply grateful to Conference Minister Diane Weibel for her thought, partnership, friendship, and leadership. We share a journey of seeking to ensure that we steward the great legacies of our communities toward a thriving future for all at a time when the world desperately needs God's good news entrusted to us. This year has been both exciting and demanding as we advance our commitment to living into new ways for PSR as part of a network of communities of faith and learning, to rise to the needs of this moment and bring to bear the witness of our faith and the resilience of our communities. PSR brings to this moment clarity of identity around our legacy of being unafraid and our mission of preparing spiritually rooted leaders with the vision, resilience, and skill to create a world where all can thrive. To fulfill our mission, we're approaching our work as an ecosystem marked by a preferential option for an emerging generation of people of color, a queering of binaries, a stackable approach to education, and fueled by a distributed network of partners. We invite you to learn more about our work at psr.edu or to come visit our campus, where we're building an intergenerational learning community for social change. You may be surprised to see how theological education is changing when it is shaped by a community that reflects the growing diversity of God's children. The best expression of our partnership and of PSR's impact are our alumnus and our students. Thank you for the privilege of helping to shape your journey and through you to transform the world with the love of Christ. Blessings in your time together as we build community, worship, and pray and rehearse the kingdom around an ever expanding table. In justice and peace, Reverend Dr. Vasquez Levy. If you're interested in learning more about PSR, my colleague Kimberly and I have a table, so please stop by. We would love to talk with you and connect with you. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Nicole. And a great note that indeed we do have an exhibit hall with many things worth checking out, especially the PSR table. And again, thank you to PSR for your sponsorship and support. But we also have our financial sponsors. All of our financial sponsors have booths, including the Cornerstone Fund, the Insurance Board, Church West Insurance, and of course PSR. And they all have swag, so be sure to check them out. And they also have lots of information that is very helpful for your local churches, so be sure to also check that out with the free swag and take that back to your churches. So friends, this morning we are pleased to welcome as our keynote speakers for this annual gathering, two individuals who are part of the UCC Council for Health and Human Service Ministries. Jamar Doyle began his service as president and CEO for the Council for Health and Human Service Ministries. I'm going to call it CHISM. For CHISM in March of this year. Prior to joining CHISM, he worked for 16 years in community development in Cleveland, Ohio, most recently as the executive director of the Greater Collinwood Development Corporation. Paula Barker is the senior executive assistant for events and administration. She began her service with CHISM in 2017. Our conference minister, the Reverend Dr. Diane Weibel, was at a meeting earlier in Cleveland earlier this year and got a chance to hear the staff of CHISM talk about the work they are doing to live out their mission and vision to advance the work of all health and human service ministries in the United Church of Christ in creating a just, caring, and compassionate world. The description of CHISM's work in diversity, equity, and inclusion, as well as affordable housing and healthcare justice, and racial justice sparked something in Diane that led her to talk to them about being our keynote speakers for this year's annual gathering. To build on the theme of the elephant in the room, and in particular, this year's theme of Learn, Love, Act. CHISM has created resources and instituted programs that can help all of us as local churches and associations, and together as the Northern California Nevada Conference, live out our call to seek a just world for all. So please join me in welcoming Jamar and Paula, and we are so grateful to both of you and the entire staff of CHISM for the work you do on our behalf and in partnership with us, and of course for being here with us this morning. So please welcome Jamar and Paula.
I'm gonna see if I can take this microphone. Good morning.
Good morning.
Think we can do a little better. Good morning.
Good
Awesome. Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. It truly is an honor to be here with you today. To be a part of the Northern California, Nevada Conference's RDEIJ journey. I love the theme in terms of the elephant in the room, because it's been the elephant in the room for too long. And that's why we have the outcomes in our society that we have today. So I commend the conference, and I'm thankful to Diane Weibel and the leadership of the conference for inviting Paula and myself to be here today to just share with you what Chisholm has been doing. And we're doing our small part, and we've also created resources that we'll share with you today that can help on your journey. But we recognize there's no end destination. This is something that is going to be ongoing, because we are undoing over 400 years of hurt and harm to a number of communities. And it's not just about race. It's also about class. It's about all of the isms, the sexism, the racism, the classism. So we're going to go through all of that as part of our journey. But I'm getting a little ahead of myself because I get excited about this topic. Again, I'm Jamar Doyle, I'm going back to my old job. I'm sorry, I've only been on the job since March. So this is month number 3, which is why I'm so glad Paula is here for us as well, because she can really get into the details of what's happened before I arrived at Chisholm. I'm just so glad to be here and to share some information with you. I'm gonna let Paula introduce herself.
Did you say you were the CEO?
I did, that's right, I forgot to get to that. Yes, so I'm not the executive director, that was 4 months ago. I'm the president and CEO of the Council for Health and Human Service Ministries for the United Church of Christ. And Paula, thank you. And we have an inside joke, because I did that for 16 years, so I'm still in the mode of saying executive director, and Paula always goes, no, it's president and CEO, get it right. So thank you, Paula.
Yes. And I'm Paula Barker, and I'm the Senior Executive Assistant for Events and Administration. And I'm also the Corporate Secretary, so I do a lot of correcting.
She keeps me on my toes, yes. Absolutely. So we'll jump right into it. And first, before we get into Chisholm and its journey, we just want to share a little bit about what Chisholm is with you first. Chisholm, again, is the Council for Health and Human Service Ministries of the United Church of Christ. And it really means we are the hands and feet of Christ embodied for the church. We are a collection of over 70 organizations that are in the health and human service fields that then represent over 400 sites across the country. And it's everything from youth service, senior care, elder care. Help me out, Paula, what am I missing? Senior care, elder care, youth services. What are other areas? Those are our main ones.
Yeah, those are our main ones. We have disability care.
That's what I wanted to mention, disability care. Thank you. And disability care as well. So, and really what all of that represents is over $1 billion in uncompensated charitable care. And so when you think about that, and when you think about sort of Christ's love in action, it's really, what do we do for people? And how is that embodied through the church? Out on the street. I like earlier during praise and worship, it said, moving the movement and the message out of the walls of the church and into the street, right? So it's really what this is when we talk about caring for over 3 million individuals in 2021. So it really collectively is the impact that Chisholm has across the country through the organizations that we then serve, and that we make sure that they are able to help us move forward with our vision, which is to create a more caring, just, and compassionate world. The world as Christ would have it. So now we're going to get into our. Okay, I wanted to make sure you wanted to, in case you had something. Want to get into a little bit about, and I'm going to stand over here because Paula's got the computer that also has our notes. Get into a little bit about Chisholm's RDI journey. But before we do that, I want to do a little bit of table setting and just talk about how we arrived at the details that Paula is going to share with you regarding Chisholm's RDEIJ journey, as well as go through some definitions so that we have sort of a framework as well as a common dictionary to work from in terms of what we're talking about. But first, I just want to talk about the groundwater. And one, this is my first time in the Northern California area. And so I like this picture. I did not take it though. I am not that good of a photographer, believe me. But found this picture and it just kind of spoke to me because it's so peaceful and calm. And it reminded me of the groundwater, and some of you may be familiar with this analogy, but I'll step through it. So just sort of imagine you're walking along this beach and you're at this beautiful setting. And while you're walking, you come upon a dead fish. Yes, you'll say, ew. And one of the things you'll say is, well, I wonder what's wrong with the fish. Something must have happened to this particular fish. What did it not do correctly that it's now in this state? But let's imagine instead of it being the fish, it could be a child in our education system. That one child, you'd say, what's wrong with that child? Did he not study hard enough? Did he not maybe get enough support at home? Maybe it's the healthcare system. You'd say, well, maybe that child didn't get the right nutrition, didn't eat right well, didn't exercise enough. Something must be wrong when there's one. But let's say you go a little further down that walk and come across this scene. Half of the fish are dead. Now what do? You might start to say, maybe it's not the fish. Maybe there's something in the water. Now that we have half of the fish, we begin looking at systems. So again, instead of fish, maybe these are children in the education system. You don't say what's wrong with that child. You begin to say, what's wrong with our systems that we are producing inappropriate and unacceptable outcomes? What's wrong with our healthcare system that half of the people, or more than half of the people, are not receiving appropriate healthcare? Something is in the water. Something is in the water. And so when we talk about groundwater, and this is not our framework, this is from the Racial Equity Institute out of North Carolina. They've done some amazing work. The website is here. We will make sure that all of these slides are available so you can utilize these resources. But it really is a framework. And I like this framework. And I like this analogy because a lot of us in the church and even in our health and human service industries, we treat fish. We try to help people. And we have to. If someone is hungry, we need to meet that need. But sometimes in our helping, we may be throwing them back into poisoned water. So the problem keeps happening. We're treating fish. We're not treating the groundwater. We're not treating the source of the problem. So really, this is based on research and observations, and I'm just going to go through these 3 points. That number one, racial inequality looks the same across systems. 2, social economic differences do not explain the racial inequalities, and inequalities are caused by systems, regardless of people's culture and behavior. It's not the people, it's not the fish, it's the systems that we're putting them into. So when we embrace these truths, it forces our leaders to confront the reality that all of our systems, institutions, and outcomes emanate from racial hierarchy on, I've got to go around that pole there, on which the United States was built. I better float by Paula again. I like to walk around, y'all. So ultimately what we're saying here is that we have a groundwater problem. Groundwater, 95% of the fresh water on Earth is connected by the groundwater. So if the groundwater is poisoned, you're going to have all of the fish impacted. And even the healthy fish, or the fish that think they're healthy, they're still impacted too, because they're swimming in that same poison lake. That's really what we have to consider. So just the next slide, I'm not going to go through all of these, but just a couple key ones here. You can see African Americans from the Center for Disease Control is 2.3 times more likely to experience infant death than white Americans. 1.9 times more likely to die of diabetes. Some other statistics, these from the Bureau of Justice Statistics. African Americans 2.7 times more likely to be searched on a traffic stop. 7 times more likely to be incarcerated. So when you look at this, again, we're talking about across systems. The lakes are all poisoned. There's something in the groundwater to receive these kind of outcomes. Next slide. So what do? If racism is a public health crisis, what do? And if the COVID-19 pandemic has only exacerbated the inequalities that we've seen on that slide, and that's just race. I could have gone through a whole nother slide. We just don't have time. We could have talked about disparities between men and women. We could have talked about LGBTQ individuals and the discrimination that they face. We could go on and on and on. It's across systems and it's across isms. And if COVID has only exacerbated this situation, what do? And why the church? Why should the church respond? I'm going to slide over here because I want to read these and it's too hard. So from Ephesians 2, this is from the Message translation. The Messiah has made things up between us so that we're now together on this, both non-Jew and outsider and Jewish insiders. He tore down the walls we used to keep each other at a distance. He repealed the law code that had become so clogged with fine print and footnotes that it hindered more than it helped. He then started over. He tore it down, y'all. Instead of continuing with two groups of people separated by centuries of animosity and suspicion, he created a new kind of human being, a fresh start for everybody. Christ brought us together through his death on the cross. The cross got us to embrace, and it was the end of hostility. Christ came and preached peace to you outsiders and peace to us insiders. He treated us as equals, and so made us equals. Through him, we both share the same spirit and have equal access to the Father. Galatians 3, verses 28 and 29. In Christ's family, there can be no division into Jew, non-Jew, slave and free, male and female. Among us, you are all equal. That is, we all are in common relationship with Jesus Christ. Also, since you are Christ's family, then you are Abraham's famous descendants, heirs according to the covenant promise. So as followers of Christ, we are called to be co-builders of the city of God, who dismantle all preventable suffering and oppression, and to be present for the pain that remains, and to release life force of the resurrection in our collective story and action. As such, God calls us to repair our world to one of equality, where everyone has an opportunity, free from barriers, for a life of health and well-being. Amen. And I like this. So really, for me, it boils down to this. As Christians, we follow a Messiah who preached a message of equality, a message that said across access to God's love was available to all who believed, regardless of religious or social standing, directly challenged religious leaders and authorities who benefited from the status quo. He preached a message of love and interconnectedness. And remember this, y'all. He died of state-sanctioned violence for preaching this message.
Yeah.
This is our work. This is our work. This is our work. Amen.
Amen.
So, a couple definitions, and then we're going to get into, Paula's going to get into the work that Chisholm has done over the past few years. Because again, I was not present, but I think you will be impressed. And I think we can then talk about the resources we've pulled together. And from there, we'll just have a conversation about what comes next. So just some definitions here. Diversity. Diversity is all the differences between us based on which we experience either advantages or we encounter barriers to opportunities. And again, and I said this earlier, it's not just about race. Equity. Allocating resources to ensure everyone has access to the same opportunities. Equity recognizes that advantages and barriers, the isms that we talk about, exist. And I want to take this next slide and just talk a little bit about equality, equity, and liberation. And I love this slide. So that first picture that you see on the left is equality. And let's talk about the table setting. First, we've got 3 children here. They're trying to watch a ball game, and they're of different heights. They have different abilities. They have different access, whatever you want to call it. And there's resources available. Now, there's options. You can either distribute them equally, which is what happens on the left. But distributing it equally does not acknowledge that they all have different access and they all have different limitations. So a lot of times in this country, we want to say, everything's equal. Just give everybody something equally. Well, if someone is starting out from a disadvantage, that may not still solve the problem. So we've got one child that, can see everything and has got way more than he needs. One child just barely sees, and then the third can't see anything, but everybody's got the same, right? That's, equality. We've distributed it equally. When we talk about equity, we start to talk about something that sometimes we think of as a dirty word in this society, redistribution. It's not a dirty word, amen.
Amen.
We're saying because there are different abilities or different levels of access or different challenges that each of these children face, we need to distribute the resources in an appropriate way so that everyone can see the game and enjoy it. So at that point now, we don't have the little child that's not enjoying anything and hands are slumped over and can't see the game. Hands are up. He's cheering because now he can see. He's got 2 of the boxes. One for the child that still needs it, and then the other child that doesn't have the box but still gets to enjoy the game. But really what we want to get to, and that's a step towards getting to liberation. But the real issue is removing the barriers. How do we get rid of the fence? So that everybody, no matter who they are, what their stature, what their ability, can enjoy the game. That's what we want to get to, is liberation. Next slide. I like this slide too. It just kind of frames it in a different way in terms of belonging. So when we think of the first circle there, it's exclusion. All of the gray circles have their circle, and everyone who's not gray is on the outside. Then we can move over a little bit and we get to, thank you. I had to run over and see. We get to integration. So the circles are let in, but they're segregated. They're not really a part of the circle. They're in the circle. They're not really a part of the circle. Then we get to inclusion. Everyone is now dispersed throughout, seems much more inclusive. Almost seems like the answer, right? But it still is the circle. It's the same system. When we get to belonging, everyone can be who they are. See, in inclusion, those colored circles had to still fit in to the framework that existed previously. When we get to belonging, everybody gets to participate in the way that makes sense for them.
Yeah.
And so that's what we're really talking about. How do we get to belonging? How do we start to dismantle some systems and rebuild things so that we get to belonging? Amen?
Amen. And that table is much bigger.
And the table is much bigger. Yes, when you think about that slide too, it's no longer that one circle. There's many circles. The table is open for all. Thank you, Paula. So when we think about inclusion, it's fostering a sense of belonging by centering, valuing, and amplifying the voices, perspectives, and styles of those who experience more barriers based on their identities. And when we get to justice, that's really removing that fence. That's changing that circle. That's dismantling the barriers to resources and opportunities in society so that all individuals and communities can live a full, dignified life. And these definitions are from the Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Collaborative. So now I'm going to turn this over to Paula. And with that framework of what we're going to be talking about and the definitions to set the table, she's going to begin to talk and step us through Chisholm's work specifically around this area. So Paula, take it away.
Thank you very much, Jamar. So this slide here, we're looking at the 10 pillars of our advocacy action items. And Chisholm became an open and affirming organization in 2015. In November of 2018, we came up with these action items to really center ourselves and figure out where we can ask our constituents to get behind us and where we can team up with some of our collaborators, such as everyone here. So you look at these items here and you think about, well, why these items? Why not other items? And you think, there were 31 million people that did not have access to affordable health care. There were 13.8 million households that did not have access. They suffered from food insecurity in 2020 and also 2019, prior to the pandemic. According to the National Alliance on Mental Health, there were 52.9 million adults that suffered from mental health illness in this country in 2020. That's somebody here knows every single one of these people. These are your spouses, these are your loved ones, these are your colleagues. These are us that are sitting here. Somebody is suffering and we need to help. So we created toolkits all throughout 2020, and each toolkit addressed a different item that's on our action item list. So be sure to check out those toolkits in our advocacy center. And of course, those numbers are jarring. And when we thought about it, it was jarring for our board and it was jarring for our staff. And we thought we had to do something, we had to do more. And so that made us think, what could we do? What can we do to expand our reach? And so we said we are going to collaborate with our partners such as you all, partners such as the Heartland Conference back in Ohio where we're from, and also, of course, our friends at the UCC. And they did a medical debt relief initiative. And during that initiative, I'm not sure if all you are familiar, but for every $100 that was donated, $10,000 of medical debt was abolished. Numbers. Yes. And Chisholm, we donated $15,000. And we asked our friends and our colleagues to help us along the way. Donate as well. We need everybody to donate, okay? So that we can get as much money and abolish as much debt as possible. And in February, as of February 2022, the UCC had abolished $104 million of medical debt. Woo! And on the next slide, we have what we did. Of course, during the George Floyd tragedy that played out on TV and the following protests, it was too much. We had a board meeting in June that was just a couple days after that, and it just was too much. We threw our agenda out the window and we said, we need to do something. We need to talk about this and only this. We need to come up with a statement, and not only a statement, we need to come up with what we're gonna do, because we need to do something. So this right here details what we committed ourselves to doing: a financial commitment to one or more organizations. This is pretty much done yearly. Our board and staff has pledged to live these out in their own lives. Make this a part of our lives. The staff is going to develop racial equity audit, and we've done that, and you'll see in the ensuing slides. And of course, the resources. We need to share what we're doing with our friends and colleagues and just keep on sharing and make things available for all. And of course, communicate back. What all the others have told us that they've done and what we're continuing to do, we must keep communicating that. And you can find that, all of those things are on our website as well, chisholm.org. So for our personal commitments, I stand to tell you that I joined the PTO, part of community builders in my community. And with that, we decided, I co-led a project with my partner, and my partner on the project, and we decided that for MLK Day, which came under the umbrella of community builders, we, instead of, because Zoom, of course, it's not like we just decided this, it was Zoom. We had no choices. We couldn't get together. So we said, you know what, how can we reimagine this? And we decided we would come up with a handbook. And that link there is the handbook to the Shaker Schools PTO, the community where I live. And it shows 15 days of the lessons and learnings of Dr. MLK. And included in the online website is readings and questions to help people along the way. In 2022, we followed that up. Instead of doing 15 days, we did 6 weeks. So we went all the way into February to continue, because it's not just a day that we think about MLK and his lessons and teachings, it's continuously. So we went 6 weeks and into February, and we decided to focus on the 6 steps for nonviolent social justice. And so those 6 weeks, each week we hit another topic and along the way. And this year, we outdone ourselves again into 2023. We've started already. And so we started last week actually with having forums and continuing the conversation of how can we help families. And part of the 6 steps for nonviolent social change is education, and another part is information gathering. And so our forums include those things. And of course, personal commitment. So we include the action steps in that as well. And that's just for my personal stuff. But as far as our staff, we walked through the 21 days racial and social justice. At that time, it was the Racial and Social Justice Challenge. And it takes us through 21 days, and it's an online guide to just have a place, have a time out to just literally look at some of these items. And you're gonna look at race, power, privilege, and leadership, and really deep dive in. And with that deep dive, you find out different things about each other and about yourselves. And that's where we come up with our team agreements. It's on the next slide. And the number one thing there is that we honor the different ways that people got here today. And we expect that it's going to be messy. We honor and we ask questions of ourselves and other people. And so as a staff, we live by these guiding agreements in all the work that we do with each other.
And I just want to chime in and say, the reason we did team agreements, and I would encourage perhaps all of you to think about that as well for your organizations, is the work, as it says there, is messy. And sometimes there's going to be disagreement. And sometimes we're going to have to work through the history and the legacy of hurt and harm that has accumulated over these centuries. And so, and everyone brings their own perspective to the table, and everyone's welcome, but you have to have these team agreements, I think, in place so that when things get difficult, there's not that inclination to want to give up or to want to withdraw back or to go back into familiar patterns. So these team agreements sort of say, we acknowledge it's going to be messy, but let's push forward, and let's push forward with love, because then if we're together as a team, externally, we can also begin to do the work. So this was important for the staff.
Yeah, it really was. And but anyway.
Sorry, I didn't mean to jump in, but I just wanted to talk about how important those team agreements were for our process. Thank you, Paula.
Yes, thank you, Jamar. I mean, it helps us. And I was going to mention the last agreement, which was that we work to understand how we all benefit from the oppression of others. We all benefit, and we need to understand that, and that's where it gets messy as well.
Thank you.
And so also we did a book group, Together We Learn, and we opened that up to anyone who wants to join and read along with us. And the first book that we read 2 years ago, I believe, was How to Be an Anti-Racist by Ibram Kendi. And in that book, we learned the terms and the definitions, and more importantly, we shared our stories and examples that helped us recognize the reality of the racism and the impacts on our lives. And then we went to Native by Caitlin Curtis, which taught us about land acknowledgements. And we stretched ourselves to look deeper and say, what about labor acknowledgements? So now when you see our events and presentations, we always will include a land and a labor acknowledgement, because there are those who have sacrificed on our behalf. Then we also went through the reason to have hope course, which was a part of General Center, and we'll get on that later. We have another slide for that. But as part of our financial commitment that we agreed to, initially our first year, we were in This was after we came back from this was in 2020, after we came back from our annual gathering. We were grateful to have our annual gathering in March of 2020 in Memphis. So those students you see there are actually a part of the new ballet ensemble. And those students are given the opportunity to dance and use dance as a form of education and mentorship. And we decided to give each organization on that list $3,000 towards their efforts to dismantle systemic racism. And we also opened it up for our membership and others at our 2021 annual gathering to give as well. And so they make no barriers to the access to the dance program for those children that are there. And many of them do go on to become the teachers as well. They stay with the program and just grow up. We have the overdose and drug use ministries of the UCC that's on the list. And they are working to, they're now called the harm reduction overdose prevention industries, which I don't know the acronym, there's always an acronym in the UCC. But they know that everyone knows someone that's on drugs. And we have had over 200 people die every year from drug overdose. And those are preventable deaths. And that's 70,000 parents, siblings, children, spouses, friends. It's just too much. The Bail Project, they believe freedom should be free. And they work to match dollars to get the protesters out of prison and out of jail. And they have worked systemically to get people until their court date out of the justice system. The Poor People's Campaign, that was started by Dr. King, and it's been continued on by William Barber. And it's just to dismantle the inequities of poverty in America. And I encourage you all, if you have time today, to join onto their Facebook page, as they do have a protest going on today. And of course, it's not least, it's first on there. It was the Grassroots Law Project. And that was the law team that was working with the families of the Breonna Taylors, the George Floyd, the Ahmaud Arbery, and many others that were harmed by this destruction. And they were seeking healing, and they were working with them. So those are the 5 people that the 5 organizations that we initially gave money to. And we also, this past year at our annual gathering, we were able to give money to AMPT, which is a music program in Louisville, Kentucky. And we gave them 10 keyboards because they do mentorship through music.
And I think as Paul is transitioning, what I'd say, particularly since I know I'm amongst church folks and friends, you know, it's really putting the 3 T's together. It's time, talent, and treasure. So when we talk about that, when we talk about this work, our board and our staff had to put in the time to understand the issues, maybe unthink some personal biases that maybe we've learned, unlearn some things and learn new things. We had to put our talents to work to begin to partner with some of these organizations that Paula has listed. And it's not just enough to do that. We also have to put some money to it, put some dollars to it, because we know a whole lot of money goes into maintaining the system. Yeah. Amen. So it's going to take a whole lot of money to undo it. And that's why I think even the healthcare debt relief program at the UCC was able to amass and then to eliminate so much healthcare debt is so important, because we know how much debt can shackle people literally from being able to fully participate in our society. So it's going to take all of it. And as you're working through your process as well, I think just keeping through and keeping in mind those 3 T's that we like to talk about, and how your conferences and your churches and your associations might be able to engage that here in your area as well.
Thank you, Jamar. I was going to transition and say that next we looked at ourselves to see if what we were seeing is the same thing that everybody else was seeing. And so we had to bring on somebody else, because we couldn't just look at ourselves. I mean, I look nice today, but we can't just look at ourselves. We have to have other people look at us. And so we brought in Equius Group to do an assessment of our board and our staff to see where we had some holes, where we could fix things. And this was a 6-month process with interviews with staff, with board, with stakeholders, and then they produced some final recommendations. Want to review those recommendations?
Absolutely. So once, and as Paula said, we had Aqueous Group come in and we had to do a self-check. We may think we're at a certain point along this journey, but let's have an outsider review it and let us know, how are we doing on some of these things and where can we improve? So there really were, 5 different pillars. The first 3 are up here, just beginning to first look at, our internal capacity. And so number 1, doing that ongoing assessment of needs and really looking at, as part of that, our hiring processes through that RDEIJ lens. So we're being authentic and making sure if we're, as Chisholm, if we're doing hiring, how are we making sure that we're keeping that lens in mind? And through that, be able to increase our diversity and make sure that we're a more inclusive organization. We don't want to, one of the things that we've been intentional about, and I understand that the Northern California Nevada Conference is being very intentional about this as well, is making sure that it's not just words that are on a piece of paper. They're not just statements, but that we are actually taking the time to figure out how to build the systems that make us live out what we're talking about so that we can start to bring that elephant that's in the room out to the light, right? So second, our members, as I said earlier, we are a membership-driven organization. And so we looked at our member engagement as part of that capacity building, reframing our member engagement, again, through that RDEIJ lens, to make sure that as we are engaging our members, we're able to share with them the resources and knowledge that we've accumulated through this, just as we're doing today with you all here gathered for your annual gathering. So that was important to us. And, part of it is because, again, when we work with all of our agencies, they look just like every other agency and organizations that are across the country. So for instance, I'll bring up the point that we understand that women and people of color, people who are differently abled are grossly underrepresented in boardrooms. And so how do we begin to have those conversations with some of our Chisholm agencies and then help them to begin to address that problem in a way that's authentic to where they are? And so that's something to think about as you're working with through your churches and through your conferences and associations and the partners that are here in Northern California and Nevada. And then, how do we look at growing the Chisholm footprint, through our connection and covenants with the UCC, its ministry supports. And we did a 3-year advocacy plan to help us figure out what that could look like. Next slide. And part of it is we're making sure we kind of read some of these slides as we understand those on Zoom, where as much as possible, making sure that at least you can't see the slides, but we're sharing as much as possible while being respectful of time. So, the 4th recommendation was around how do we specifically advance that racial diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice work. And again, putting in real action plan together, goals, objectives, action plans, and timetables to hold ourselves accountable to say, if we're gonna do this, if we're gonna put finances towards organizations that are fighting for social justice, what's our timetable for that? What's our commitment? Making sure we have clear goals that the organization can fire. That was important. We wanted to make sure that we nurture the efforts of our other members. And so not just what Chisholm's doing, but as I mentioned earlier, as we're sharing resources with our member organizations, how do we also nurture them along their RDEIJ process? This one I think is also important. We wanted to make sure that we had a supplier diversity process because again, through all of the activities that we do, our conferences and leadership retreats and other things that are part of the life of the organization, recognize we're engaging with suppliers all the time. That's another financial resource that's going out, right? And if we're going to the same people we've always gone to for the 85 years that we've been in existence, we're probably not being inclusive.
Yeah.
I remember at a training I was at in Cleveland, one thing that was brought up, they put all of the organizations in Cleveland up on a timetable and just said when they were founded. Cleveland itself was founded in 1796. And a lot of the organizations in town were founded in, the 1800s, maybe early 1900s. So when you think about it, most organizations we engage with, big corporations, they were either founded during the time of slavery or they were founded during the time of Jim Crow. And so those thoughts, those processes, those ideas, they're baked into who they are. And so we have to think about that when we're spending our dollars and evaluate where our dollars are going. And perhaps there are organizations represented or headed by people of color, by women, by other folks who have been traditionally left out and disadvantaged. So how do we begin to shift that through our, and we're not spending more money through the supplier diversity, we're just redirecting it in a way that maybe has an impact that is in line with our RDEIJ process. And that's not to say Chisholm is fully there, but we're trying to work through that process, work through our plan to get there. So I think that's an important point. Again, human resource policies, making sure they're through that racial diversity, equity, and inclusion, and justice lens. And then making sure our website, number one, has content that is accessible to all, and that it also has content that speaks to everything that we've talked about. And we'll show you a little bit of that hopefully later for those that are in the room, because when we get to it, our anti-racism center online has a host of information. So don't think you have to remember all of this after today. When we show you that website, a lot of everything we're talking about, toolkits and beyond, and resources are all on our website, and we're sharing it freely with everyone. Because again, we want to build this and be a part of the movement. And then lastly, growing board capacity. So making sure that our leadership, number one, is representative of the diversity of the people that the organizations of Chisholm serve, representative of the diversity of the nation that we live in and the churches that we are in fellowship and in covenant with, and that also our board members are knowledgeable and have gone through, again, some of these RDEIJ trainings and resources and workshops, so that we're all, again, speaking from singing from the same hymn book or speaking from the same Bible, so that we have the same definition of what we're trying to achieve. And so from that, Equius Group was able to help us develop what they call the Equity Prime tools. And these are just, I think, framing questions under 3 different topics that help us think through where are we along the process. And this is a tool that I think could be helpful for your organizations, churches, associations, and conference. So internally looking, self-check. How is my decision or action either empowering or isolating others that are often marginalized? Just thinking that through sometimes when we're making our decisions. Also, what did I do, or how have I made sure that my work was done in an equitable and inclusive way? Moving down to interpersonal equity primes. What nonverbal cues are helping or inhibiting communication? How are we utilizing one another's different perspectives? Making sure that if we're reaching for diversity, we want to make sure that those voices can then also rise to the top, so that we don't get into tokenism, right? Yeah, we're diverse, people are here, but their voice isn't really listened to. So that's that interpersonal equity prime. And then institutional equity prime. How are we creating a diverse and inclusive environment where we are, this is the speaker, I'm sorry, where we are listening and, I'm gonna switch, sorry. Where we are listening and respecting all perspectives. And are we aware of the hierarchies and power dynamics that are in existence? So those are our equity prime tools that help guide some of our decision making. And again, this is sometimes where it gets messy, because people may not have the same ideas as you're working through that. And that's okay. We want to get into the mess so that we can get past it and get to the best.
Yeah, and this slide here talks about where we share our stories and where we gather our stories. So we share our stories and our updates. And if any of you have any updates, please email over to us, because we always like to include stories in our Diacony newsletter. And you can sign up for it at chisholm.org/news/diacony, or just email one of us and we'll get you all signed up with your credentials. Also, we like to make the focus of our annual report what our numbers are. What are we doing in the community? What are we doing to show that we are actively engaging in the work? And that was a part of our statements on racism as well in the beginning. And then beyond those initial commitments, we did have our General Senate resolution. That was a Reason to Have Hope curriculum. And that General Senate resolution was a collaboration also. That was Chisholm, along with Quorum, the Council for Racial and Ethnic Ministries, that got together and submitted a resolution to the UCC declaring racism as a public health crisis. And part of the purpose of the resolution was to raise the church's consciousness of racism as a public health crisis from a theological, biology, and health perspectives. We wanted to be able to monitor and advocate for public policies that work towards health equality by addressing the social determinants of health and divest in those that cause harm, violence, and death. We wanted to discover the ways in which current ministries and mission connect, and we can address racism as a public health crisis and explore new ways of incorporating this into our work. So now we're going to take a look at our anti-racism center. Are we able to do that? Are you able to click that link?
I need to do a.
While he's doing that, please read the poem that's on the side there. It's an untitled poem by Beth Chernow. There is no such thing as a safe place. We exist in the real world. We all carry scars and have caused wounds. This space, it seeks to turn down the volume of the world outside and amplify the voices that have to fight to be heard elsewhere. This space will not be perfect. It will always be, it will not always be what we wished it to be, but it will be our space together, and we will work on it side by side. Amen. Amen. Yes, we will all work on it together.
And so what we wanted to do is show you a little bit of the Chisholm's Anti-Racism Center. Because again, part of what we wanted to do is share with you all tools and resources that together, can help either individual churches, associations, the conference itself, other organizations that you may be partnered with. And again, all of these resources are free. So if we scroll down just a little bit, you'll see that there's a welcome. We talk a little bit about, again, our journey. Then we get to some reflection questions, which I think are good and can help just begin to frame and think about some things. So for instance, where do I fit into the collective story of anti-racism? What is the narrative of my life saying, asking, shouting? What story is my organization? That angle gets me all the time. Yes, we'll just gonna stay leave it right there. Y'all can read it. We're gonna scroll down a little bit more because I do want to get to some of the offerings. And so when we get here, we'll stop right here. Thank you so much. I appreciate you. Thank you. There's a few sections that I think are important when you get to here. When you get to grounding works, and if we're able to open that, when you scroll down, you'll see that there's a whole list of some of those resources that helped us. So when we talked about how to be an anti-racist, other contemporary books that have been part of our book club or that we're looking to read. And we'll make sure again that you guys have this. There's podcasts that you could be aware of that again can help frame the conversation for your churches and for your organizations. Films, if you want to have a film night, again, just to begin the conversation, to set the table. There's films that are recommended, poetry, that also can help sort of, again, set the groundwork. And then at the bottom, and I think this is important too, the discussion guides. So again, all of this lives right on our website at the Anti-Racism Center. You can go to the discussion guides as well. And again, there's just different tools and resources that can help you. We've also pulled together, I know we won't have time to go through all of them, but there's a ton of resources, as you all know, through the United Church of Christ. We've pulled those all together in one place as well so that you're able to look through them. We also have pulled together voice. Okay, yeah, we can go through that real quick. So these are UCC resources if we go down. The UCC Racial Justice website, the Just World for All virtual calendar. You go down a little further, recent webinars and recordings, again, podcasts, books that are recommended. So again, just a wealth of information that rests on our Anti-Racism Center, because we wanted to, as we gather things, share it with others so that you can know what tools and resources exist out there for organizations and for nonprofits and for churches. There's a section where we go through white supremacy at work and what that looks like, anti-racist policies and how to address them, leadership and leaders and what they can do along this journey. So again, lots of tools and resources. We wanted to share these with you. And you can always reach out to us at Chisholm. If you find something on the website, want to dive more into it, the Poor People's Campaign. And again, like I said, it's not just about race, it's about class, poverty. You saw the disability harm reduction, which gets into our opioid epidemic, reproductive justice. So we really do get into a lot of topics. It's not, although it's called the Anti-Racism Center, there really are a lot of tools and resources just in general to talk about how do we begin to make this world more caring, compassionate, and just. Again, that's our mission. And if we're going to do our mission, we have to be about this work. There is also our toolkits that are on there, separate from the Anti-Racism Center. Those 10 pillars that you saw at the beginning of Paula's discussion, thank you so much for going through those. Our toolkits are up there as well, and they cover everything from poverty and healthcare. So please use our website as a resource. If there's something you're interested in, have questions about, please contact us at Chisholm as well. Be more than happy to connect you to resources or answer any questions you have. Just wanted to step through that. Thank you so much again, Chief, for helping us with that. Thank you.
Thank you. So all of that begs the question, how will we be in community together? What will we ask of each other? How much will we give? How strong will our bond be? The stronger it is, the more we can create. If there were no barriers, if that fence wasn't there, what would we build together? And why do we do this work? Why does it matter? So we have a poem here, and it's called What Will Matter? Ready or not, someday it'll all come to an end. There will be no more sunrises, no minutes, no days, no hours. All the stuff we collected, whether treasured or forgotten, will pass to someone else. Your wealth, your fame, your temporal power will shrivel to irrelevance. It will not matter what you owned or what you were owed. Your grudges, resentments, frustrations, and jealousies will finally disappear. So too, your hopes, ambitions, and plans and to-do lists will expire. The wins and losses that once seemed so important will fade away. It won't matter where you came from or which side of the tracks you lived on in the end. It won't matter whether you were beautiful or brilliant, even your gender or skin color. It won't matter. It will be irrelevant. So what will matter? How will the value of your days be measured? It will matter not what you brought, but what you built. Not what you got, but what you gave. What matters is not your success, but your significance. What will matter is not what you learned, but what you taught. What will matter is every single act of integrity, compassion, courage, and sacrifice that enriched, empowered, encouraged others, to emulate your example. What will matter is not your competence, but your character. What will matter is not how many people you knew, but how many people will feel a lasting loss when you're gone. What will matter is not your memories, but the memories that live in others who love you. What will matter is how long you will be remembered, by whom and for what. Living a life that matters does not happen by accident. It's not a matter of circumstance, but a matter of our choices. We must choose to live a life that matters.
Amen. Amen. Amen.
Thank you. And now I think at this time, if people have questions, comments, we are available, I believe, for the next 20 or so minutes. Or we all put you to sleep, maybe, I don't know.
Good morning. Thank you for your very interesting and insightful presentations. My name is Karen Brown. I'm from the Santa Clara Conference. I guess I'm supposed to say that. Two questions. One, is Chisholm providing the JEDI framework for the UCC, or is it providing a framework for health and for Chisholm and to share with its members? And then the second question is, you mentioned the longevity of the vendors, and you have some partners I know who've been with you for a long time. JEDI doesn't start with the lower folks, it starts with the leadership. And I know that some of your members aren't at the place that Chisholm is. So I'm wondering how you will help them reach the leadership or have the leadership embrace what you're trying to do.
Thank you. No, those are both important questions. And I'm gonna let Paula speak first about the first question, just because of my newness and just sort of that relationship between how we're informing or working with the UCC through our framework. And then, we'll also talk about, how we work with our members, to your point.
Yeah, so we don't frame what the UCC is doing. We have our own, and we're kind of holding the bar for our health and human service ministries and challenging them to do this work themselves and in their organizations. And we partner with some UCC agencies, but we do not do the work for them because, as we mentioned before, there is Quorum, who has the racial and equity ministries. So they do a lot of this work as well. There's a lot of other partners in this work, and disability resources. There's a lot of other partners in this work, but we have collated these resources as a part of Chisholm.
And I would say, and I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, Paula, but from what I've experienced over the past 3 months, is that it also sort of a symbiotic relationship. So the UCC as a denomination is, really doing a lot of work, and I believe in many ways as a Christian denomination is at the forefront, through Quorum and through, a lot of the other, social justice and advocacy work. And so that in some ways even has inspired Chisholm to do some of the work that we've done, which I think then is a feedback loop that then works with the UCC. In fact, this past year, Essence Ellis, who couldn't join us, but she was our joint fellow between Chisholm and the UCC Social Justice. I'm probably saying the name wrong. What's the proper name of?
Justice and Witness Ministries.
Thank you. I'm still learning everything. There's a lot of organizations and acronyms, so I'm getting together. Thank you so much, Paula. But we shared the fellowship this year was shared between
Justice and Witness Ministries
and Chisholm. And I think that gets to that symbiotic relationship of how we together are marching along this JEDI framework, as well as in social justice. And I think to the second question, it's an important one to me. In part, and I think that's part of why I also talked about, I know that boards don't reflect the diversity of this country, and every organization has a board, and leadership should reflect that diversity. And so part of what we've been doing, we talked about it a bit in the presentation, is exactly that. How do we share these resources with those organizations and encourage them, strongly encourage them to make this journey themselves, and say that really, ultimately, it is to your benefit, because as we progress and as more and more people, understand the negative impacts that the historic weight of racism, sexism, classism has on our society, there's change, I think, in the air. We're not there yet, but there's just something feels a little different about this moment that we've had during the pandemic. George Floyd, and we're in Cleveland, Tamir Rice, and we can name. There's unfortunately so many names that have suffered from brutality, right? But we don't want to lose that moment where everyone right now, it's the conversation point. We don't want it to die, right? And to everyone to fall back to where we were. We got to seize this moment and press for real change that then becomes lasting, including in those organizations and on our boards. Thank you for that. And we're still working on it.
I'd like to add to that also, because I would say that part of our statement on racism was signed on by about 100 people, and that was organizations as well as individuals that signed on to that and made that commitment also. And a lot of the financial backing comes from our board, and also part of our Equius group, our results included more board meetings. And in those more board meetings, we have decided to do trainings for our DEI, and we had one this past February where people trained with our Equius group. And so just doing those continual trainings and really incorporating our board into that work has been very, very helpful.
And I'm glad you mentioned it too, because part of that sign on for that letter, we showed it briefly, but we didn't get into it due to time. Some of our organizations that are members did sign on, have begun to do some of those things, and have even put some funding into it. So for instance, we asked members to join us and match our $15,000 donation to go towards healthcare debt reduction. So it's incremental. I'm not saying it's there, and it's not all of the organizations, but we are grateful for those that did sign on, that have made a commitment, and we're going to keep pushing.
Hi, Jamar.
Hello, good morning.
Maria Coyne from the Cornerstone Fund. So nice to see you in person.
Nice to see you.
This may be a question for Paula. I'm curious because we're about to launch our own audit. What was your biggest surprise from the racial equity audit you did with Equius?
Well, our biggest surprise was that they were proud of us. That was probably the biggest surprise that we weren't expecting. We were one of their favorite groups to work with because we were so engaged with the work, and it was everyone. It was the stakeholders. It was not just the staff, it was our board, and everybody was so excited and so willing to give that information. And so that was one of the things that was really on both sides, because we were excited that they were excited. We were like, what? You're your favorites? How did that happen? But it has been really a treasure, and being able to bring them back so many times. But other than that, there were a lot of things that we already knew. We could see it ourselves. It was pretty obvious, some of the things that were on there. As far as some of our policies or some of the other things, we knew we needed to do more board meetings. We were only doing 2 board meetings a year. We knew we needed to kind of engage our board just a little bit more. But how do we do that? We're a staff of 4. And so we knew that we needed to grow our staff and grow our capacity. How? That was another question. And we're still working through that. But those things we kind of knew, but the biggest surprise, I would say, was that they were really proud of us and really proud of the work that we had already done. Question in the back.
Yes, Michael Vossler from United Church of Christ, Petaluma. I was asking earlier in this about SURG, S-U-R-G, standing up for racial justice. Are you familiar with that?
I am not familiar with SURG.
Okay, so suffice to say, UCC Petaluma is too white. in its present configuration. I'm also a member of the Order of Ecumenical Franciscans. We too are too white. So the question is, how do you go from the consciousness of being too white, committed to the anti-racism movement, and looking for the allies that will be most helpful for training, for just encouragement and support, and for accountability. So Surge sounds like something that might be that kind of ally. Are we hearing today that Chisholm could be that kind of ally?
Great question. And we would love to partner and ally really with any organization that wants to follow along on this journey and share any resources that we can. So yes, we'd love to partner with you. To get to, I think, the other part of your question, one, I think you've made a big step in terms of recognizing that those institutions you named are too white, as you said. And if that's the case, based on where you live and who you serve, number one, being able to just make that proclamation is a huge step because you've acknowledged the elephant in the room. So then I think the next step is, as you said, figuring out, who your allies and colleagues are that can help to begin to address that situation. And then it's really going to be in terms of what are the solutions. It's not cookie cutter because every situation is different. Every community is different. I can't tell you what that solution is, but I do want to share with you very quickly a story that having a similar conversation with a church about a month, maybe 2 months ago, that was thinking through what they were going to do. And long story short, they're in the southwest part of the United States. And they said the same thing, the neighborhood around us doesn't look like the people inside the walls of the church. We need to evaluate why that is. And one of the things for them that they came to realize, and sometimes the solution may be out of the box. I'd never heard this before. And I was like, wow, never would have thought of this. The church, and again, they're in the Southwest United States, very Latino, a large Latinx population. Their church was built in the 1950s. It is a UCC church, and so they wanted to, in the 1950s at that time, harken back to the UCC's history. So the church is designed on a New England style. So it has the traditional, parapets and steeple and, the architecture. And so they came to realize once they engaged their community, your church is the physical, I don't even want to set in because the physical structure doesn't look welcoming to me because it looks like it's for someone who doesn't look like me. And when that particular pastor said that, I said, wow, I never even thought about how sometimes the physical spaces we walk into may not be welcoming to people. And so they're going through a process of figuring out, well, we have too much space and it's no longer working for us today anyway. Let's see if maybe we tear this down or build something that is more welcoming to the people who live in this area. So, and again, I was mind blown when I heard that. I was just like, wow, that is, just wouldn't have thought of that. But sometimes it'll take that iterative process of meeting with the folks within your community and figuring out what that is and connecting with those allies that can help you through that process. So there's not one answer, but the fact that you've named the elephant in the room is a great first step. And that means you're well on the way. Thank you for that question. Thank you. All right. I think that is it. Thank you all so much. This has been an honor and a pleasure. Help to get you guys back on schedule too. So woohoo. Awesome. Thank you all so much. This has been wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And as I get settled here, I have a couple of things for you. So first of all, thank you so much for sharing your your journey and Chisholm's journey with us, for us and for helping, for guiding us on our own journey and joining us in it. So we have a couple of gifts for each of you personally, and then a gift from the conference for Chisholm itself. So thank you so much for your work, for joining us and for partnering with us. Thank you. So much for, again, for sharing with us, and not least of all, for getting us back on schedule. So just a couple of announcements now, or for us now. As I remember where I am and what we are doing. So there is for some people some of us just have different kinds of needs sometimes, and some of us just need a physical offering basket and to be able to give cash or check. That is okay. There is an offering basket on the front table here that will only be available until lunch. So if you need to, please give there. You are welcome, Roy. So you can get there, and then that will be available through, not through lunch, until the beginning of lunch. And so speaking of lunch, lunch is from 11:30 to 12. You might see more room in your schedule there, and that is there. That is great, but we need you to check into lunch by 12. That is our window there for our timing for keeping us on schedule. Speaking of, we did so well yesterday, and we are doing great today. But please be prompt, especially as we have a lot to do this afternoon. And then just a note on lunch, just for our agreements are for what we are for following the what we have said we will do with Sonoma State and following their rules and procedures. All of our food that we eat the wonderful food that we eat all needs to be consumed in the cafeteria. And so we need to eat there, not take it out, and we do not have to-go containers either available to us, nor are we able to bring in our own. So we do need to eat in the cafeteria. And then I think that is all of the announcements I have right now, unless any others are coming to me. Need to a couple key people.
I'm just gonna repeat the 11:30 lunch, as close to 11:30 as possible. This was really important to Sonoma State that we do, because they have another group that their time starts at 12, so.
So there is another group that starts at 12, so that's why they really need us to start at 11:30. And remember, the staff here are hosting us very well. We're not their only guests, and they are doing remarkably well. So thank them, be kind to them, respect them, and please also remember that lunch is from 11:30 to 12.
Aren't we lucky for that?
And we are lucky for that, and we are looking forward to that. We are not there yet, though. We do have a little bit longer of a break right now that I will stop talking into. But then we will gather right back here at 10:30 a.m. for our AV 506 workshop hosted by Church West Insurance with very important information that your churches certainly do need. So join us back here. We will be in recess until then and begin again at 10:30 for our AV 506 workshop. All right, friends, welcome back, and let's get settled and seated since we are at time. And so it is now my pleasure to turn it over to Tim Harris and from Church West for their workshop on AB 506. Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I am actually the president and CEO of Insurance Board, but the Church West people like to think of me as an extension of the Church West organization, so I think that was certainly appropriate. Thank you so very much for the privilege of this invitation and the opportunity to be here. I am here with a number of my colleagues, including one of our employees, my Vice President of Marketing and Sales, Farnas Berna. We have been privileged to be able to support and sponsor this conference for a number of years. And we are so happy and grateful to be a part of it. One of the original places where the Insurance Board was started was actually in California, in the California Conference, way back in the 1980s. And in response to a difficult insurance environment where churches oftentimes had a difficult time finding insurance at any cost, thought leaders within the United Church of Christ got together to figure out how they could provide a solution to churches. And California was one of the first conferences to jump on board to be a part of that initiative. I'll just talk briefly about who we are and why we're here, and then I'll kick it over to folks here on the panel to continue the discussion. As I mentioned, we started really in the 1980s in response to a difficult insurance marketplace, and over the years, we've grown to be a property liability insurance program that provides insurance to more than 4,000 churches across the United States, all 50 states. The largest denomination of churches that we handle is obviously the United Church of Christ, our founding denomination, but we also have other partner denominations that are part of our program, including the Presbyterian Church USA, Christian Church Disciples of Christ, the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America, Reformed Church in America, and we also insure the Alliance of Baptists group, Fellowship of Churches as well. And we are, again, part of our charge is to provide a comprehensive property liability insurance program that individual churches would have a difficult time going out and securing on their own. Because we've been doing churches for 37 years now, we feel that we have a pretty good idea of the coverage needs, property and liability coverage needs that churches have. And among those includes our obligation to provide a comprehensive abuse prevention and abuse coverage in your insurance policy that protects your churches and ministries against abuse-related claims. It is our obligation, I think, as a ministry, to be able to protect those who are the most vulnerable among us. And that really kind of leads me to why this panel is assembled. There is a new law called AB 506, I believe it is, and these individuals will get into that in more detail. But again, in terms of being able to protect those within your congregations who are most vulnerable, these individuals can help you walk through the law and understand the requirements that you have as church organizations and ministry to do just that, to help protect those organizations. And with that, I will turn it over to one of the agents that I've known for a long time. His name is Charlie Cutler. He is the president of Church West. I know a lot of people come up and say, when I ask them, how they're doing, and we talk about Church West, they say, well, Church West is our insurance company. And they oftentimes get that confused. We actually often are providing the insurance. Church West is our exclusive agent in the state of Ohio that actually represents, or state of California that actually, I'm from Ohio, sorry. From California that actually.
We can do Ohio too.
They represent our United Church of Christ churches in the state of California. In order to get to insurance board in the state of California. If you're United Church of Christ Church, you need to go through these wonderful professionals at Church West. Without further ado, I will kick it over to Charlie Cutler.
Thanks, Tim. This is some of the wonderful people you can see up here. We've got a great team. It's not just Charlie. We've got a staff of 45 and one puppy. I think we've got Walter up there too. That's our team. We're located in Redlands, but most of you probably know Rob or Zach from our office. They both live and serve up in this area, and we've appreciated representing the IB out here. And it is very unique. We insure about 4,000 ministries with various insurance companies, but the IB is really special. It's that covenantal relationship between the churches that allows everybody to secure coverage and the appropriate coverage and the adequate limits. So appreciate you guys a lot too. So, but yeah, that's my team. And some of you have been on our webinars or have been to our boot camps. Has anybody been to the boot camp or to the webinars? And yes, we have a lot of fun, but we really like doing them in person. And you'll recognize a couple of people. Next slide. This is BQB Law and Bob Brockman from BQB Law. He's got a fantastic team. We lean on him heavily whenever there's litigation. They're the primary attorney that is used here in California for litigation for religious organizations, and we lean on them heavily for their resources. And when I told Bob we were coming up here, I told him I was coming up. He goes, well, I'll go. And I was like, oh, fantastic. And then we can go to the next slide. And then Leslie, she says, well, I'll go too. And so Leslie is from the Church HR Network. And we know that sitting in your chair where you are in your ministry, you don't have authoritative resources, people that get it right. If you go to the California Chamber of Commerce, it's wrong. If you go to secular resources, they're incorrect as well, because the laws impact you differently. And so I rely heavily on these two, and I appreciate the two of them being here today. And AB 50, you're applauding them? They're great. AB 506 came out following what happened in the Boy Scouts of America, and legislation was passed, and they said, no, we have to have a standard of care. We need something to say, this is what everybody must do. The IB has been putting together resources that I think are very good resources, and they go beyond what's there for AB 506. But AB 506 came out with some specific things, and they're a little bit different. That's what makes it really challenging for us, because we've been doing things, I think, in a very good way, but there's some things you're going to have to adjust a little bit. It's very specific, and I think it's good. As you can see here, this is from on the left-hand side, it's from the Church Law and Tax Report, and they look at the reason why churches have been sued. This study goes back 30 plus years, and you can see year after year after year, the number one reason why churches end up in court is because of abuse of a minor. And if you can see on the right-hand side, we've seen a lot with other denominations, and this was one group of churches in Texas, and these were all 700 plus people that had inappropriately touched children, and it hadn't been reported the correct way, and there hadn't been proper oversight. And I think AB 506 does a good job of addressing this. So, and to let you know, everybody that's attending and watching, yes, Daniel, awesome, is going to receive a copy of this slide deck. You'll receive links to some of the resources that the IB has put together, and other webinars and resources that we put together from Church West. And that's it. Okay, cool.
Okay, the first thing that we need to talk about with regard to AB 506 is, what is a youth service organization? Because the statute addresses a youth service organization. Oddly enough, the legislature gave us a bit of a kind of a circular argument with regard to or circular definition of what a youth service organization is. And I see some people shaking their heads because I think they probably have been on our webinars on this issue before. We're all struggling with this right now, okay? one of the biggest questions we've gotten is, when does it go into effect? It went into effect already. It went into effect January the 1st, so it's already in place. But when we define what a youth service organization is, it gives us this kind of an odd definition. A youth service organization is an organization that employs or utilizes the services of individuals who, because of their relationship with the organization, are mandated reporters under California's mandated reporting statute. So we then need to go to the mandated reporting statute to find out who these people are. And the mandated reporting statute in subsection 7 tells us that a mandated reporter in this area is someone who is an administrator or an employee of a public or private, that's us here, youth center, youth recreation program. Most of our ministries aren't really putting it. It appears that it's a youth recreation program, but that's designed to get the kids into church, or a youth organization. And that's the broadest part of the definition of all. So a youth service organization is someone who employs or utilizes someone who is a mandated reporter in a youth organization. Gotta love that one, right? Okay. All right, so now we know what a youth service organization is.
Wait a minute. I tried so hard to get out of this, to be honest with you. Not that I was trying to get out of the standard of care, but I pushed back with DOJ and I said, our churches, our ministries that deal with children really youth service organizations? And they said yes.
So that, of course, is the enforcement agency for the statute, and they should be in the best position of all to know. So anyway, a couple of questions that we might ask. Are schools youth service organizations, preschools, daycares, camps, all of these different groups? Leslie, what do you think?
Well, it depends on what school, but most schools are also covered by the education code and they have different requirements. Preschools are covered under state licensing and daycares as well, so they have different requirements. Charlie, you want to touch on camps for a minute?
Currently, camps are youth service organizations, but there is pending litigation or pending legislation that is going to be passed in the next couple of months. It's been actively, being pushed through to put together similar legislation and similar requirements as AB 506 specifically for camps. So in the meantime, camps, AB 506. And then, is this news to you, Diane, that there's new legislation coming? Okay, yeah, camps, it's coming next year. So
Charlie, do you know why the legislature is going to pass this new legislation for camps? Because they know the Church West needs another topic to put on one of our webinar programs, right? So stay tuned, everyone, keep following it. We'll have a program on it.
denominational offices, same, you're a youth serving organization. And if you don't have any kids, you're not a youth service organization. If you expect that there will never be kids to ever show up, you're not a youth service organization. But we hope that we're all youth serving organizations and churches.
So a denominational office that doesn't have a camp, how are they serving youth or doesn't have a youth program?
So denominational offices are responsible for the oversight of all of the churches underneath them. And so, what do you think about that?
Well, the question came from the top lady in the organization here, so I don't want to go afoul of whatever she might think on the subject. But I do agree, when we look at it, the denominational office is the oversight of the entire organization. You know, some youth service organizations don't have an individual with the title of, quote, administrator, end quote. And you wonder sometimes, if we were in litigation, how would a jury view this? How would the Department of Justice view it? They could, as I see it, until this is clarified, view the denominational office as the administrator, perhaps.
But maybe you could go to Sacramento and do like an afternoon session on polity and explain it.
the question then begs, if the Northern California Nevada Conference is deemed a youth service organization, doesn't that automatically mean all 113 churches are youth service organizations and need to follow AB 506?
Yes.
Sorry.
You didn't even have to finish your question. It's a yes. Sorry. Yeah.
You know, keep in mind that this is a brand new law. It is very common in these circumstances that there will be amendments, there will be clarifications, there will be decisions by a court of appeal that address these issues. So when we are dealing with the brand new kind of raw version of the law, we need to be as careful as we possibly can and interpret it as broadly as we can to make sure that we are not misleading anybody of its potential implications. Leslie, is this for you or?
You just did administrator.
Oh, okay.
Training. Okay, so to meet the new requirements of AB 506, there's a couple requirements. One is that you have to train all of your people that fall under that, your administrators, your employees, your people that have direct contact with children. Have we got into regular volunteers yet? No, we'll get there. Okay. In child abuse recognition and prevention. And additionally, you have to have policies and procedures on how you're going to deal with those things. So there's a little bit of action required on what you have to do with this law. And that's where you start, is you have to have them all trained. And there is some training that we're going to go over later that will suffice for you to meet that requirement. You also have some policies and procedures you need to get in place in order to meet the requirements of this law.
But the text that you're seeing up here is the specific verbiage in the legislation, so you can read through that and kind of get an idea, but it's really, and this is new. What we've always been focused on in the past in church has been preventative measures. And I think where the church has messed up is in the reporting and in that transition from the church to an outside authority. And we've all been through the training, and it's very good. You know, the training is, I think it's important and needed in church. And like I said, we insure over 4,000 ministries. We get calls weekly about how do we handle this? How do we handle that? It's really clear, and the training I think is excellent, and it'll be well received in the UCC church.
And you know, Charlie, for many years, the churches that we've worked with, you know, I've been working with churches for 30 years, all different denominations. The focus has always been on training for mandated reporting, the reporting aspect of the requirement. And there are some sections in the mandated reporting statute that discuss training on identification, but the focus has always been on reporting. Not that that isn't important, it's absolutely critical. But now we are also seeing a new, what I would view in large part, a new requirement that implements training on identification of abuse or neglect and putting that out there. And when you look at that training, man, it's really something else.
Well, I think it's something that needed to happen because they pushed reporting, but how do people know what to report if they don't really know what they're recognizing and seeing, and what are the signs and red flags of abuse?
And the churches would investigate it, and they'd say, well, is it that? Are we going to create problems in the church or for this family, and you know, that sort of thing? It's really clear now. If you have a reason, well, you'll go through the training, everybody in here. Okay, who do we train, Leslie?
Well, the people that need to be trained are laid out in the statute. First and foremost, the administrator, an employee. And you know, one of the immediate questions that we got when we started doing these programs in January is, do we have to train all employees? Don't we just train employees that work with youth? Well, that isn't the way the statute is drafted at all. If you have a youth service organization, it says you must train your employees. There is no limitation that that employee must be working with youth. So the administrator needs to be trained, the employees need to be trained, and then the regular volunteers need to be trained. This is the first time in the history of my research of the law that the term regular volunteers has ever been used or coined anyplace. So we have a new term, regular volunteers. Leslie, what's a regular volunteer?
A regular volunteer is a volunteer that volunteers 16 hours a month or 32 hours a year for your organization. That's a lot of people likely, but Bob, more importantly, what's an irregular volunteer?
Everyone who is not a regular volunteer is by default an irregular volunteer until we get further clarification from the legislature.
So that's who we train. Oh, go back to that one more time. Okay. On the who we train. One of the questions that comes up a lot is, what about a custodian? What about a choir director? What about, somebody outside of youth or doesn't work really in quote ministry? The law says all employees, it's all employees.
You know what, Charlie, this, I think would be a good time to bring this up also. A regular volunteer by statute, as Leslie said, is someone that volunteers 16 hours or more a month or 32 hours or more a year, and is also over the age of 18. So if we have, in a lot of the ministries that I deal with, they have young people volunteering. They're bringing them along. That's part of their ministry. They are not required to be trained. Some may have asked us, well, should we send them for the training as well? This is the group who are under 18 that we are intending to protect. If you look at the training, a lot of it, especially on the identification of childhood sexual abuse, is very explicit. And it is not material that many people would think would be appropriate for someone who is under the age of 18. So we are advising, and Leslie, I don't know if you're doing it any differently, we're advising clients that they should not be doing the training for those who are under 18.
Yeah, it's just not appropriate for them. Why would you put a youth under the age of 18 through the training that is designed to protect them? And additionally, they're just not at that maturity level where they can handle the training. Now, maybe some are, but the law is specific. These are the people we're trying to protect.
Now, to go get the training, the legislation included a resource that you could go to for free training that would meet the requirements for identifying neglect, identifying abuse, reporting neglect, reporting abuse. And that's at mandatedreportersca.com. And so you would send your volunteers to go there. Volunteers, it's 2 hours of training. Employees, it's 4 hours of training. And for clergy, it's 6 hours of training. So you can go there, it's free. You direct people there, they get a certificate, they print it off, they bring it back to you, and it shows that they've completed it. Leslie at Church HR Network has designed something that has an administrator's module. There's a fee for it, a fee for her services, depending on the size of your organization. And you have it where it's done in about an hour and a half, 2 hours.
Yeah, about 90 minutes. You can do it if you can get through it and answer all the questions right quicker. You can get through it quicker.
But it still meets all of the CANRA, the Child Abuse Neglect Reporting Act guidelines. And then also with the IB, we have Presidium. A lot of you probably used Presidium in the past, and that's something that's free for UCC churches. And they're launching their training
in a few weeks. So hot off the press, in addition to what we just talked about, the 4-hour training that is free, what Leslie provides, Presidium has put a video together. It's getting approved by a local law firm in California, and we should be able to release that in the next couple of weeks. So more information to come on that.
See, you come to these programs and you just get the latest, greatest, and the upcoming exciting things, right? Yes.
I had a question. So if you have a Sunday school and it's 20 minutes a week, and your slide said that it was, I think, 24 or 32 hours.
16 hours in any 1 month, 32 hours in a year.
32 hours a year, and I calculated that out would be 96 Sunday school classes in a year, which is more than you could have in a year. So then the volunteers who teach Sunday school would not have to go through this.
I would still put them through it because I think you're cutting such a fine line and you're going to say, well, you can't do it. I think it's you know.
Wait, how long would it take them to reach 16 hours?
Well, that would be 96 weeks in the year, and there are only 52 weeks in a year.
But it's for a 22 or 20-minute Sunday school class.
Yeah.
I mean, it's up to you. And if you want to look at the law that way and say, hey, you know what, we're almost to the point where we need to, so forget about it, then forget about it.
Well,
But that's, I mean, that's.
let's just make a wise decision. So if you were to get an abuse claim and you had people working directly with children and you split hairs, the potential liability is greater, and you can speak to this way better than I can. But I would want to make sure that any of my actual Sunday school teachers that had direct contact with children, regardless of how many minutes or hours they worked, would go through that. Now, maybe you have another ancillary volunteer or a support volunteer who is only there a little bit and you choose not to call them regular volunteers, okay. But the main person in charge of the direct oversight with children, I'd probably err on the side of caution, but that's up to you.
The law says no, but I think you want to. I mean, because I think we all want to do that in our church. We want to, this law is to provide guidance for us, but we still make all of our own decisions, but we should be doing more than what this law is requiring.
There's another question over
here. The law pertains to all employees. Does it also include all volunteers that exceed that, even if they're not working with youth? So the ones who are decorating the sanctuary every week?
Yes. And this is where, in my personal opinion, our job here is to tell you what the law says at this time and to try to provide you as much guidance as we can with it as it stands at the moment. I suspect that there may be clarification coming, particularly because of just the type of issues that you just raised. You know, you may have a group that comes in and takes care of the sanctuary or does lawn mowing or whatever it might be. And technically, as the law is drafted at this point, if they are volunteering more than 16 hours a month or 32 hours a year, they need to go through it. Now, it's also possible that the legislature, in reviewing that, could say that is exactly what we want. Because in many church organizations, you have youth organization activities or youth group activities going on in one area, and then you have people volunteering on the same campus at about the same time in some other area that is unrelated to the youth. And if our objective is to create an environment that provides the greatest amount of protection for a minor while they are on your campus, it may very well be the intent of the legislature that we include all of your employees, all of your volunteers, whether they have direct access to youth or not. You know, I have been very proud and privileged to have represented churches for 30 some years at this point. Going with that is the downside, the dark side of having to have represented many, many ministries going through an abuse claim. And anything, if you've gone through that at all, anything that you can do to try to prevent that from happening is very important. And we see patterns sometimes where someone that has a mindset of some sort that is intending to abuse a minor may start in one area and then work their way around into another area, eventually with the idea of coming into contact with youth. So perhaps that's what the legislature has in mind, but keep following us, watch on churchwest.com and when our upcoming programs are. When we get more information on these updates, we'll certainly let you know.
Yeah, I want to clarify, my understanding of the mandated reporter training is it's required every 2 years.
That's correct.
So I am not going to turn around and follow the people behind me, but I'm just going to be clear. Our mandated reporter training for lifelong learning is every 3 years. But to stay compliant with the law, you're all going to have to do it every 2 years. Eventually, we can work on getting our lifelong learning requirements in sync with the new California law. But I just want to point out
that if you are up to date on mandated reporter in terms of your standing as an authorized minister, you may not be up to date on mandated reporter in terms of the law.
Good point.
Background checks. So first one was training. Second area is background checks. Leslie, former cop, tell us about background.
All right, background checks. So background checks used to be where you could subscribe to a bunch of different kind of services to do some background checks for you. But AB 506 basically now says you have to do live scan. How many of you guys know what live scan is? Perfect. How many of you guys already do a live scan? Oh, I love it.
Oh, wow, great.
Yeah, that's great. A lot of you already do it. If you don't do live scan, there's a whole process and procedure by which you need to go through with the Department of Justice in California to get set up to do live scan, to receive the results of live scan, but no other background check will suffice in California any longer. Now, there is a standard of care that says you can use some other additional services to get additional background checks on people other than just live scan. By the way, there is no background that covers everything, just so you know. But in California, the standard of care is now that you have to have a live scan.
And just to be clear, it's a fingerprint background check. We use kind of the brand name live scan, that's what they call it in the state. It's the only one that uses fingerprints, goes to the Department of Justice, and you can also send it on to the FBI. Oh, next slide.
I have a question.
Sure.
I think I know the answer, but I just want to make sure. Our faith community is in the process of selling our building to a school. Now, they will have their own criteria. As far as we know now, the only time that our faith community will be on that campus is to worship in the sanctuary on Sunday. We're not going to have any or very little contact with the children, and our faith community has no children as of now.
Okay. The answer that you have in mind is the correct one, okay? The organization that brings that school in, okay, they are responsible for complying with whatever mandated reporting statutes are applicable to them as a school. You are not operating that school as a youth service organization. They are operating it. So any duties that fall under AB 5, under California's mandated reporting statute, the licensing statutes, and all of that, that goes to them, not to you.
Okay, so let's talk about who needs to be live scanned. Everybody, your volunteers need to be live scanned, your administrators, your HR people, your employees, everybody who is considered under one of those titles has to be live scanned. And a lot of people say, well, what happens? I volunteer for youth soccer. I've been live scanned for youth soccer. Does that count? Well, unfortunately, it doesn't count. Right now, every organization you serve with, you have to actually go through and get a live scan done individually for each one of those, because your fingerprints are actually registered to that organization to receive the results of your live scan. So the organization has to go through some policy and procedure and protocols in order to get certified to receive those, but you have to do it for each organization you work for.
Leslie, you want to go through these?
Yeah, sure.
So what we run into sometimes, just to follow up on that, is you have people that volunteer or work at church who are also public school teachers. And so they've had their background checks run and all that. And they say, well, I don't need to have it run again in church because I've already had this done at the school. So as Leslie explained, the statute doesn't have an exception in it. AB 5 doesn't have an exception that says you don't have to get live scanned at church if you've already had it done someplace else. So it is possible that people that you are live scanning at church have also had the same process done in their secular positions as well. Okay.
I've also had the unfortunate experience of having to talk to DOJ quite a few times over the last couple months. But the fact of the matter is if you work for a preschool and you go to work for another preschool, you can transfer. You can actually transfer your live scan results from one preschool to another. Fortunately, you can't do that for youth service organizations yet. We're hopeful that maybe that legislation will come up and they're working on it, but right now you can't do that. So if you've already had a live scan, you still need to have one for your organization. It's not transferable at this time. Any questions on live scan? Yes, sir.
There is a question on live scan from one of our Zoom participants. I'm just going to read it here. It says, we've been trying to reach the AG for several months to obtain a code number needed to activate our online portal. We've written email and phone many times, but have yet to reach a person or receive a response to our inquiries. We're not the only church that has had a similar experience. Do you have a direct number or way of putting us in touch with a person who can help us?
Sure. So the Attorney General, is that who they're, the AG?
It seems like, yeah, it says
Okay.
AG.
So it's not the AG, you have to go through the Department of Justice, and there's a complete application you have to fill out in order to get an ORI number. And that application is taking 90 to 120 days to get.
And Daniel, what you'll be sending out to everybody has a link on our website that has everything you need to know about live scan, step-by-step, sample forms, how to fill it out, all of that stuff. So it'll be there.
There was a question in the back, Charlie.
So you spoke about the conference being an administrative organization. If I have been live scanned by the conference as a volunteer, do I need to be live scanned by my local church as an employee?
Yes, ma'am. Right now, there's no way to share that information. We're hopeful that the DOJ will come up with some type of way for denominations and churches underneath them to share that. I've had multiple conversations with about 4 people at DOJ, but that has not happened yet.
Hey, let's do this. Let's go through these questions because we've got a hard stop at 11:30 for lunch. Otherwise, we might not eat.
And we're going to be around after to
And we
answer
will.
questions.
And so let's go through these questions. So if they refuse to get a background check,
They can't work with kids.
do all volunteers, including those that don't work with youth, need a background check?
Yes, we've answered that. According to the code, they do.
Which employees need a live scan?
All.
Okay. Which volunteers need a live scan? Board members?
All.
Board members as well? Okay. What about those that we've already conducted a background check? We have an online background check that we've been using for years. It worked wonderfully. And Sally went through it. She passed. Does she need a live scan?
Yes.
Should we do the state background check plus an online check?
Sure, if you want.
What if somebody already has a live scan from another organization?
It's not transferable unless you're at a preschool.
And can we just give everybody Diane's cell phone number and show them?
Yes.
I have Diane and I have been friends for I don't know how many years now. So I do have her cell phone number. I think I even have her home phone number and her address and all of that.
Daniel, that's going to be going out to everybody?
It's easiest to get her very late at night.
Next slide, please.
You still want to be friends with her?
And then this you'll receive, this has all the fees, what it costs, and I'll tell you, in the long run, it's less expensive because it's one and done. You do the background check, you say, okay, we're doing the background check on Joe, and then if you get a subsequent arrest notice, and you would be notified if he's ever arrested. So it's good. It used to be that you would have to do it every couple of years and redo them, and so in the long run, it ends up costing more. I think some legislation is really good. And I think that they've really done some good things. Not perfect, but it's pretty good. Next slide. Okay. Policies and procedures.
Policies and procedures. We have each youth service organization must develop its own internal policies and procedures. The policies and procedures must address 2 topics. First and foremost, you must have a policy that ensures the reporting of suspected incidents of child abuse to a person or entity outside of the organization. Now, the reason this is in there, I think, I just speculate, but a volunteer technically is not a mandated reporter. A mandated reporter must report to law enforcement or child protective services. But here, We're doing background checks on mandated or on volunteers, regular volunteers. And we are now developing a policy that says that if someone in our organization, which may be a volunteer, has information about suspected incidents of child abuse or neglect, our internal policy requires that that information be reported to an outside government agency. So it is a way of quasi bumping up our volunteers who aren't mandated reporters, kind of ensuring that the information they get ends up getting reported. See? Very, very important. The second thing that your policies and procedures must include is a policy that states that to the greatest extent possible, there will be the presence of at least 2 mandated reporters whenever administrators, employees, or volunteers are in contact with or are supervising children.
So wait, if I have a Sunday school class and I have 2 volunteers leading it, and they're not really mandated reporters, does that mean I have to have 2 employees in there?
Doesn't comply with the code, does it, Leslie? We have had more discussion on this one sentence over the last couple of months than anything else. We have had more calls about this, more discussion about this, more discussion online on webinars than any other part of it. Isn't that true?
It's totally true, yes.
Yeah, but the way the statute is written at this point, you must have not 2 regular volunteers present with the kids. You must have 2 mandated reporters present.
Which are employees, administrators, HR people. So this is the hard part of compliance, right? This is where churches are trying to figure out how do we have that many employees to cover all the volunteers that we have to make sure that there's 2 mandated reporters present.
And then the question becomes, what does it mean to be present? We have had so many people say, if we are running 3 classrooms of different youth groups, you know, we've got our kids, our middle school and our high schoolers, and they are all there. If we have 2 mandated reporters who are in the building, does that mean they are present?
No.
And
I
again,
don't think so.
it says to the greatest extent possible. My interpretation of it is that we don't have one adult supervising children. We've got people trained, we've gone through the background checks, we have a policy and procedure, and there's general supervision of the entire operation, the entire ministry. And with the abuse claims that we've seen and that we've dealt with, it would have prevented most of these.
Do the best that you can.
So again, it's to the greatest extent possible. And what Daniel's going to be sending you, there's a model child protection policy that addresses all of these things that you can implement in your ministry.
Okay, can I throw this in here too, Charlie?
I knew you would.
Oh, sorry. I got a question. A church called last week, 2 weeks ago, and said, should we include in our policy, they were working on this policy, should we include in there that we are going to let the suspected perpetrator know that we are going to make a report ahead of time?
No.
You're interfering with the investigation when you do something like that. And that's.
Yeah, one of your responsibilities as a reporter is to not interfere with the investigation. You just suspect and report and let everybody else do the rest.
Again, what Daniel will be sending you, replay of the webinars, the guide to everything live scan from Leslie and her team, the sample child protection policy, overview of the services from HR 360, which is all the HR stuff that Leslie provides, contact information for these 2 as well, and contact information for us. We will get it.
And Diane's cell phone number.
We're going to broadcast it, Diane.
You know, I'd like to tell you I'm shocked, but the fact is they all have it.
That's awesome.
So recap, training. So it's abuse identification and reporting for the guidelines, screening, policies and procedures, but it's not enough. We should be doing more. So it's a baseline, and that's really the minimum standard of care right now. And that's just what you're gonna be, that's kind of A, B, and C, but we kind of have to do A through Z. And there's other things that we should be doing as well, and every ministry is unique. And because every ministry is unique, there are different things. So we've got some more resources for you as well. Go to the next slide. You're on, Farnaz.
Thanks, Charlie. So it seems like I stand between you and lunch, so. 30 minutes do I have? We can talk about Presidium for a long time. So as many of you know, Insurance Board works closely with a company called Presidium. They're nation's leading abuse prevention resource organization, and we have been fortunate to work with them for a very long time. They provide a lot of resources related to abuse prevention. Most of the services through Insurance Board and Presidium are free for you as UCC churches. For the churches that are insured by Insurance Board and are policy holders, there are some additional resources that you have access to. Again, you will have these links to the different products and services. The first one that you see up there is CASE. It's a series of video training educational pieces that stand for creating a safe environment. This particular module is available to all policyholders at no cost. If you're not an insurance policy holder, this particular product is about $750 or so per year. So if you're a policy holder, it will save you some money.
And if you're not a policy holder, I know a guy. We can hook you up. There we go.
Talk to Charlie, yeah. We would love to welcome you to the program. We have a lot of sample policy forms available to you. So that's the safe conduct policy that you see the second link. Know Your Score, it's a self-assessment tool, and the information that you put into this tool does not get communicated with anybody else, including Insurance Board, but it does tell you, it's a self-assessment, it does tell you what your ministry might be missing as far as abuse prevention that you should implement. And then our Modest online training module, all different types of training with recommendations for leadership, staff, volunteers, what training they should go through year one as an employee or volunteer or staff, year two, and so on. As you mentioned earlier, Presidium is coming up with a shorter than 4 hours training for the new assembly bill that passed. It is getting reviewed by a legal team right now. Hopefully they will get it released in the next couple weeks, and that information will be on our website. presidiumib.com is where you want to go to get access to that. You can also visit insuranceboard.org, our main website, go under Safety Central, and you will have access to all the resources through Presidium. I will be around before and after lunch at the Insurance Board Church West table and the exhibit hall. So if you have any questions about Presidium resources, please feel free to stop by and say hello.
I just want to say the Know Your Score, I think, is a great place to start. And it's not something that just one person can do. It's usually, you kind of get different ministry leaders, sit down, have lunch, and you can go through it. And it gives you a really good starting point on what you should be doing. The resource, like she said, it's $750 a year. I mean, it's a real value. And again, another unique thing about the IB, it's a not-for-profit that's owned by the UCC conferences. The resources, or any money that's made, actually goes back into additional resources like this to make your job a little bit easier. So I appreciate that. So we do have a couple minutes for some questions. Yes, sir.
Yeah, at the church, we're trying to get new members. You're trying to get new members, and if every member all of a sudden has to go through 4 hours of training, that's ridiculous. It's absolutely against what we're trying to accomplish.
And it's not for every member, and we want all those members, but we do want those members, once they start working with youth, to have greater threshold and greater relationship with the church.
A lot of those members will become, maybe they're not working with youth, but it sounds like even anybody that does anything for the church, whether they're just helping out with finances, whether they're helping out with gardening, whatever they're doing, they become required to get this, as according to what I interpreted your comments, you might as well say, everybody in the church needs to have this training.
Yeah, it does seem that way, but keep in mind, at this point, we are just telling you what the statute says. We're not commenting on it. We're telling you what it says and how we believe it will be interpreted. But the people that need to go through the training are the volunteers who are volunteering more than 16 hours in a month or 32 hours in a year. So a congregant who comes to services on Sunday and that type of thing, or maybe volunteers once, in 6 months or something like that, it's not going to apply to them. And when we get further clarification on this issue from the legislature or a court of appeal, we're certainly going to let you know, because the comments that you made, the concerns that you have are things that we hear all the time from our churches. It's a concern that's kind of across the board.
Well, last time I checked, legislators, when they were making new laws, regardless of where you are and all of that, they don't really sit down and go, okay, how's this going to affect the church? And so they make these laws, and then the church is kind of stuck going, my goodness, how do we do this, right? So we feel your pain.
I have two questions. One is, we have churches that nest in our building. So they rent space from us and then they be their church in our space. So there's two different churches that I can think of, and also a 4-H club, which is also run by a member of our church. Are they responsible? Is the church responsible for getting their own coverage? And the other question that I have is, what protections are with trans youth as well?
Okay, let's address your first question. As I understand it, you have a church that has, for lack of a better term, a building, and you have different organizations that come in and use part of your facilities at different times. Is that correct? All right. The answer to that question is, if you as the church yourself are running your own youth organization, then you need to comply for yourself with your organization. All of these other organizations that come in and use your facility, the law probably applies to them as well if they are running youth activities. So they would have to comply on their own for their own employees and volunteers. You do not, as sort of, I almost see this sort of as kind of an apartment building, and you own the building and occupy part of it, and then you rent out space to others. You're responsible for your part of it and compliance in your part of it. But when someone comes in and they're using a different part, they must comply themselves for their activities. Okay.
And then on our website, there's a sample facility use agreement. You should be utilizing the facility use agreement, and it does address, you want to get certificates of insurance from each of those outside organizations that names your ministry as certificate holder and additionally named insured. There's an indemnification agreement in there, which extends indemnification, extends their insurance protection to your ministry. And and then it also addresses AB 506, that they should be AB 506 compliant. We're seeing that from the school districts and camps, and they're making that same requirement. And then
with regard to your second question regarding trans youth, let's talk about that, because as I understand it, we're running short on time here, and I don't want to not address it adequately. So once we've finished here, if we can chat, if you'll be here for a little bit, I'll be more than happy to talk to you. Okay.
All right. So one quick question and then a comment. The training that you mentioned, that the 2 hours for volunteers, 4 hours for whatever, 4 or 6, is that a one-time training or is it an annual training? Every 2 years. I apologize, I didn't know that.
I just want to, while I absolutely empathize with the headache that this is for all organizations that have to follow it, let's not lose sight of who it's for. I mean, as a therapist who has spent a career working with people who were horribly traumatized by abuse as children, the more people we have that can recognize the signs sooner, even if that means your Sunday school person having to spend 2 hours every 2 years sitting at a computer, I think it's worth it. I mean, I think it's worth it for as many people as possible to be trained, to be aware. It just, you know, the impact that trauma has on people's lives is just so much more damaging than spending a couple extra hours on some of this.
Do we have another, one last question, and then, if you all are still around, we aren't gathering again until 1. If you are willing to stick around and ask more questions, lunch is till 11:30 to noon, but they are around till 1. Or you have until 1 till we regather, but we have one more question over here.
Sorry to beat a dead horse, but I was kind of bring this back to my congregation and church. So my understanding, can you tell me if this is correct? Church council members or board of directors, they fall under the category of administrators, and therefore they're required to do the training as well as the background checks, right?
Yes. So thank you to our friends at Church West and Insurance Board. Thank you so much. Don't apologize for your questions. Keep asking your questions, and these are the right people to ask all these questions, and you and your ministries need answers to these questions. So keep asking them. And yes, just to add on to what Jean said very well, protecting people is a part of our ministry. So thank you. Just a couple of last minute reminders as we are on our way to lunch. The offering basket is right here that will disappear won't disappear, it will be accounted for, but it will only be here until lunch. Just as a reminder, we need to eat in the cafeteria, and we aren't able to either take containers in or ask for to-go containers. And then we will gather back in here at 1 o'clock for some speak outs, and then go on to workshops from there. If you are a part of the Golden Gate Association, you are encouraged to attend the anti-racism workshop because you will be continuing that work in your association meeting. I feel like another announcement is coming imminently.
One of the things that we're getting some feedback about, and we know, and let me walk through some pieces here, is regarding the test vote email that some have received, some haven't. We know for sure many of you have. It's been really fun seeing your responses of what kind of time machine you would choose. And I am thrilled to present that to all of you later. If you have not received it in your email and you have already checked your spam folder, your junk mail folder, a promotions tab, into all those places where it can get wound up, I will be sending out, it automatically triggers it. It's just a reminder email, so it'll get resent to you. However, this email is not coming from me. It is not coming from NCNC. It is coming from Election Buddy. So if you're looking for an NCNC email or you're looking at it for being from me, it's not from either of those. It is from Election Buddy. And all we can do is send out that reminder trigger, but it's the same email address that you registered with. It's the same email address that had other info. So it is pulling from the same roster. And like I said, we do know a good number of you have, but we also have heard the feedback that some of you are getting hung up. So we're gonna push out that reminder email, and please look for that then at that point. Thank you.
Can I say something real quick? I wasn't getting mine. I had to take my phone off of the Sonoma State web, internet.
Wi-Fi.
And then it came through when I went off of their Wi-Fi, because their Wi-Fi isn't secure. I guess I don't know.
Okay, so we are, so thank you for that. So just a note of, there are so many issues we can have, but we will, church, we have been getting through issues and challenges for the past couple of years, and we are gonna continue getting through annual gathering as well. But right now, we don't have to get through anything. We get to go enjoy lunch. So we are in recess and go enjoy lunch, and we are in recess, so maybe even play a little bit as well.